G'day guys, Shawnee from Life and Tennis. In today's video, I'll be sharing a special interview I did with the great tennis broadcaster, Brett Phillips. Now, Brett has been involved in the tennis industry for over 20 years and is an experienced sports radio and TV broadcaster. Now, personally, I actually work close with Brett Phillips as he runs the First Serve platform, which is basically a platform that covers all level of tennis in Australia and the world, from grassroots up to the professional level. Now, Brett was also the one who organised media passes for this year's Australian Open as part of the SEN First Serve coverage. Now, SEN is the main radio broadcaster of which the First Serve sort of sits under, unofficially, not actually a company itself. And I was a part of the SEN First Serve team alongside a small group of 5 other journalists. I had the chance to interview Brett at the First Serve studios in Australia, where Brett does his regular Monday night radio show for the First Serve. And I got to ask him about his life in broadcasting and how he started the First Serve platform. So enjoy, guys. So Brett Phillips, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with me on Life and Tennis.
Pleasure, Sean. Great to be here and welcome into the inner sanctum of the First Serve.
Well, that's where I was going to start. Basically, is this is your spiritual home, I'm going to call it, and you're normally the one that's actually asking the questions to tennis players and those involved in sport. So how does it feel to be on the other end of the spectrum of being interviewed in that sense?
Oh, I feel really relaxed. I don't know what you're going to come up with tonight, but let's just let it roll. And this is my home every Monday night, doing this show, which goes around Australia and New Zealand. Been doing it a long time, but it's nice to just chat a bit of tennis and chat about life. The years go through pretty quickly, Sean.
They certainly do, and we're going to keep a very relaxed vibe here. But I mean, just as a quick little intro and sort of what the Life and Tennis YouTube channel is all about. I like to highlight those involved in the tennis industry that aren't necessarily, maybe those people that, aren't in the spotlight all the time, like players and coaches and things like that, people that work behind the scenes. And, broadcasting is one of those things. And I think for a lot of people that watch the tennis, especially as Australians, will probably have seen your face or heard your voice at least. But tell us a little bit about how you got into broadcasting in the first place, like, right back at, from uni to when you sort of started. If you can take me back, that is.
Yeah, well, it's 30 years this year that I had my first job in the media. So it's been a really long journey. But look, I was probably 15, 16, like most young guys. You love sport. Yeah. If you can't play elite sport, the next best position is to be involved in describing it in one medium or another.
Of course. Yeah.
So I sort of gravitated towards radio as a medium. I thought radio was fascinating to me. It was live. It was raw. You didn't know what was going to happen. A little bit unscripted, and got through high school. And there was actually it's quite ironic because I now live in the suburb where I suppose got my footing into the radio industry because I went to Swinburne in Hawthorne. At that stage, they ran a commercial radio course, specific commercial radio course that ran for about 27 years. And it's obviously not running anymore. They only took a handful of students, but it was 1 year of practical going out doing work experience. I went to 3HA Hamilton, 3BA Ballarat, and the only sports station that was existing back then before SEN's evolution was 3UZ. Okay. A sport racing station which became Sport 927 and now it's called RSN. Okay. And that's where I got my footing doing work experience, got my first job there as a 19, 20-year-old. And then obviously as the years have gone on, one medium sort of moves into another, in the TV's come a little bit later. Print I never probably really took to. Okay. I wasn't great, I've got to say, Sean. I'd sit there at basketball games for Basketball Australia and I'm watching the other journos type as they go, and I'd get to halftime and I had a blank piece of paper. So I thought maybe writing's not quite for me, might go down the radio path. And I started young, and it's been an incredible journey, to be honest. And then I'm still in the industry and still survived.
Yeah, of course. And I noticed from trawling through your LinkedIn profile that you've been self-employed, I guess, since 2003, and obviously part of that time, a lot of the time, has been for the First Serve. But when did you come up with the decision to go out on your own, basically, and kind of be your own boss, I guess?
Yeah, it was interesting because I started as a 19-year-old. My first probably real job, full-time job in radio, was K-Rock down in Geelong, which was a great couple of years, a fair commute to do breakfast radio 5 days a week, got involved in K-Rock footy, and actually after that stint I got a little bit burnt out. Okay. And I actually got out of footy, got out of radio and went and ran a football club.
Oh, that's right. Wow.
The Templestowe Footy Club as a 26-year-old employee, the first time the club had ever had an employee. And
wow.
I suppose I was sort of wondering where the next radio part of the journey was going to go, or just being in the media. And I decided to have a crack at freelancing and be in control of my own destiny. And it started, July 2003, and that was before SEN had even started. So I was freelancing in radio, emceeing, a bit of media consultancy, so a few different aspects to it all. And I think once you start working for yourself and you have that sort of flexibility, it's very hard to go back and just lock yourself in with one employer, but you've got to keep making it work. And of course, anyway, 20 years later, we're still here and still in that vogue.
Yeah, and so in that time, from initially, starting out, in the radio and broadcast sort of media world, to then striking out on your own, and then the idea for the First Serve, where did that actually sort of come about? Like, what had you been looking around and sort of seeing that there wasn't really a platform that was sort of covering all levels of tennis? How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, so I think for me, like most young people in Australia, in Melbourne, the sporting capital, I grew up with footy and cricket. Mad Fitzroy supporter, loved my footy. Eventually got into being an AFL commentator. That wasn't certainly the aim or the ambition. That's just the way it all sort of panned out. Loved my cricket in the summer. I would say tennis was my sort of third sport. But played it socially when I was younger. A little shout out for Brushy Creek Tennis Club up near Churnside Park. Myself, Dad, an old neighbour of ours, used to go up there and play one off, one on every Sunday morning. So I loved the aesthetics of tennis, loved playing. I remember being on a family holiday when Pat Cash won Wimbledon, climbed into the stands. We're on the Gold Coast. I'm only 13 years of age at that stage. So, and then I started doing a little bit of work for Tennis Australia. They started Australian Open Radio in 2006. So they were the first of the Grand Slams to start their own radio station. Did a little bit of work there, but then SEN evolved. And I started at SEN doing overnight radio, the graveyard shift, like you do to get in the industry. And once I had a few runs on the board here, SEN had a golf show from day one. Called Chasing Birdies with Mark Allen and Craig Spence. And I went to management and said, Chief, we've got a golf show. We should have a tennis show. Very similar. Tournaments all year, 4 big signature events, Australians travelling the globe and basically not coming home much. The benefit of tennis is we've got a Grand Slam. Golf hasn't got a Grand Slam, or one of the majors in Australia. So I pitched the First Serve to management, and management said at the time, okay, here's an hour. You've got to go and buy that airtime. You can on-sell it. You can do whatever you like with it. We can't pay to be a fully fledged, full-time tennis commentator. So that was the birth of the First Serve. And it was the only existing tennis show on radio in Australia.
And so in that time, how has it sort of evolved to where it is now? And I guess following on from that, what do you see the future in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, well, I mean, the First Serve, the signature part of the First Serve has always been the radio show, and then we've added the digital side. And I don't take all the credit, certainly, for that. But we knew that we had to have an offering across all different mediums just for the way people are consuming media. So the obvious one was to set up a website so we had a home that we could archive everything as a bit of a go-to if you want to know what's been happening on previous shows, if you want to read articles, if you want to listen to podcasts. Here's our home, and then we created our social media channels, knowing that people don't always consume you by the old-fashioned radio. So many people listen retrospectively, so we need to provide that offering, and so many people consume you in little hits and bites. Whether it be YouTube, the Instagrammers, the older people tend to be on Facebook, X for those who love to certainly get involved in the running commentary of tennis.
Yes, of course.
So the whole aim was to set up a sort of a multimedia platform, and there's more room for growth, certainly in that area.
Yeah.
But I think over a long period of 15 years, we've sort of gained a bit of a reputation as, hey, these guys are covering tennis all year round, not just January.
Yeah.
They care about the grassroots to the pros, and that's really been the mantra of what I want the First Serve to be all about, is we're following the whole journey in tennis.
Yeah, and the only platform that really does that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, certainly
in the tennis sphere, that is.
Yeah, I think here in Australia, obviously there's free-to-air TV for the Grand Slams, Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup with Channel 9. It's a bone of contention around all the general week-to-week tour events.
Yeah, of course.
That beIN Sports doesn't operate now through Foxtel. A lot of the Foxtel subscribers who mightn't have been staunch tennis people but love sport, more of the casual viewer, but had tennis as an offering with their Foxtel package. And then the newspapers, it's very much changed, that newspaper landscape. Once upon a time, the Australian, the Herald Sun and the Age all had sort of full-time tennis reporters. When we think of Courtney Walsh at the Australian, Linda Pearce at the Age, and the Herald Sun was covering tennis, so that's sort of dried up a bit now. So I think we've sort of filled a bit of a void by just having day-to-day content, whether it's radio, print, evolving, I suppose, the video, YouTube, TV space, which has got room for growth.
Of course it does.
I think, we've certainly developed a really good relationship with players and coaches, tennis fans out there who do follow the sport, not just in January, but for 12 months a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you've got a very exciting trip planned next year. So, would you like to tell the audience about that? It's a bit of a bucket list thing, I think, for you. I think for a lot of, not just anyone that works in tennis, but tennis fans. I mean, I know personally I'd love to do the trip that you're doing, but tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, the one thing here in Australia is we're extremely isolated from the tennis world, apart from the wonderful month of January when it's in our own backyard, but we're a long way from the action. And look, pre-COVID, I was certainly travelling quite a bit, covering the Grand Slams, tour finals. I love going back to Indian Wells, the fifth major, one of my favourite destinations. But it's always been an aim, Sean, to try and spend a whole year on the tour and just immerse yourself like a player, coach, those who work on the tours, and try and feel what that is like, because it is a travelling circus. It just goes from one destination to the next. So, that's the plan, locked in sort of February to November next year. And just follow the sun, basically. Taking the majors, taking the 1,000 events, a few 500s, taking the big team events, the Laver Cup, Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup, and whatever else happens in between. I'd love to take in a bit of paddle, a bit of pickle, a bit of college tennis, and just sort of get the whole experience and really just take the First Serve on the road and talk to so many great people in tennis, which is a far easier exercise when I'm here one-on-one, a little closer, to make those sort of things happen.
Yeah, of course. And so in the, I guess in your absence with the travel next year, how do you envision, the team running in Australia, for example, like the current First Serve team, of which, full disclosure, I am a member of the First Serve team, one of several. I do okay, I suppose. But, how do you sort of envision, the team on the ground, I suppose, to run the First Serve while you're travelling?
Yeah, I mean, well, tennis is, it's 24/7, as you know. I mean, the news cycle is just, it's relentless, really. You've got to have your finger on the pulse and keep churning out content. Although we try and have a little bit of a point of difference at the First Serve. Certainly there's the Aussie slant of what we do, but we don't necessarily need to be a news site. I mean, there's plenty of news sites that do that, and a big part of us is putting out really good features, of which you're a terrific feature writer of some of the important issues and topics of discussion in tennis. So, I mean, when I'm asleep, hopefully Australia's awake and firing away, and vice versa, and we can be even more advanced than what we are now in terms of our delivery of content. So, we'll just be set up a bit like the tours. They've got offices here, there, and everywhere around the world. They've got people on the ground here, people on the ground there. So we'll just roll it out and see how it unfolds. Yeah,
fantastic. And so you recently also shared the commentary with the great Jelena Dokic at the US Open. And I was just wanted to know what was that sort of experience like, because I know that you've had various sort of roles doing, the broadcast commentary to basically lead into, the Todd Woodbridges and Yelena Dokic's of the world. So what was that like, actually sitting at next to on the desk with Yelena Dokic and, doing the broadcast?
Yeah, what a star Yelena is. And in fact, I'm just watching the teaser today, the trailer for her doco coming out, Unbreakable, which I think is going to be in cinemas on November 7 onwards, which is going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
and we've
absolutely.
seen the book, of course, come out in the last couple of years. Yeah, look, the role at Channel 9 came certainly as a surprise about 4 years ago when Channel 9 got the rights to all the majors, not just the Australian Open. And there was an opportunity for someone to work the graveyard overnight who could gibber and talk tennis. But the opportunity, as you mentioned, came at the most recent US Open when the Channel 9 talent was sort of stretched here, there and everywhere. We'd had the Olympics, the Paralympics were on at the same time.
It's been a big year.
As the US Open, and a couple of big stars, Todd, of course, and the great Brenton Speed, who's one of the finest voices in sport, were on Paralympic duty. So, there was an opportunity to sit alongside Yelena and commentate semi-finals and finals. And I've got to say, as someone who's very radio trained, doing TV is quite challenging.
Yes, yeah.
To actually tell yourself not to speak, Sean.
Yes.
And you've actually got a producer in your ear at different times who will tell you, pause, do not speak.
Yes.
Let the pitches, let the crowd ambience just take over.
Wow. Yes.
And then you come in. So being very radio trained, you just want to jump in all the time and hit that moment.
Yes.
But what a great opportunity. And to work alongside Yelena, I think it's one of the sharpest minds in commentary.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Tactically astute, can read the game so well. She articulates everything. And really, she's the star of the show.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah.
And people wouldn't see this behind the scenes, but she does a fair bit of just tapping on the shoulder. And a couple of times when she really wants to get in, I almost cop a bruise right in that shoulder. All right.
Let her go.
Platform is yours, Yelena, and
excellent.
She's great to work with.
Yeah. And that was, I guess, my follow-on question is, what is it like? You probably answered a lot of that just then, but what is it like, in all the capacities you've worked in broadcasting in general, whether it's live TV, whether it's doing around the grounds, radio, even just emceeing events, what's, some highlights, what are some challenges that you've sort of faced as a broadcaster in your sort of, multi-faceted kind of role or career?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the roles I actually do at the end of every year is mentor some homeschooling students where I went to for a year in 1993, which has now turned into a 3-year broadcasting course.
Wow, okay.
And I love talking to them because I think their confidence is far greater than what I was at 19, 20 years of age. I think it's this generation, right? Yeah,
it is. Must be. Yeah, for sure.
Believing that they can just come in and sort of nail different roles. I think it took me quite a while to feel really comfortable. You'd get sweaty palms. You would,
of course,
you'd come in and predominantly radio, and predominantly I've always hosted shows on my own.
Yes, yeah, right.
So you have to have a capacity to have a conversation, and to talk. Yeah. Now I get less frantic about that these days. But if you go back 10, 15 years ago, how the hell am I going to fill this airtime? Yeah. I've got X amount of ad breaks and I can't play a song.
Yeah.
Well, I could overnight. I did slip in a couple of songs overnight just to get me to the top of the hour.
Yeah, right.
And if you haven't got a producer, and I worked with a lot of different producers, that's a book I could write.
Yes, I'd love to read that.
Well, some producers who were highly driven and some who thought this is great working at a radio station, put my feet up, just Google the net. Hang on, I've left the host stranded with no content, with 7 minutes to the hour. I'm not dobbing anyone in. But, I think that's the great part about radio, though. It's raw, and some guests basically are so good, you don't have to play a big role. And you do, and you pull yourself back to make sure they're the star of the show. There have been guests that need a fair bit of coaching. I mean, to do media for some people is very daunting. I've had guests walk in the studio and I can see how nervous they are. I can see the hands are trembling a little bit. I've got to tell them, you're talking to that microphone. They think it's an anaconda about to bite them. But once you get them going, people find great joy in talking about themselves and their journey, and they're excited about it. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but
no, it does.
I think, to perform, there's plenty of times I've walked in and you're feeling flat. You're not really feeling in the mood.
Yes,
but it's a job where you have to be switched on.
Yeah, you do. Yeah,
and you've got to roll it out and just get on with it and try and make some good radio.
Yeah, sure. And so for all the, I guess those aspiring to get into broadcasting in today's world, I know it's probably a lot has changed. As you mentioned, certain courses don't exist anymore. How would you, what would your advice be? How would you sort of get involved, or where would you get started, basically?
Yeah, I think, certainly you've got to do these courses that are on offer, and there's not necessarily the commercial radio course that I did, but there's plenty of Swinburne, RMIT, whether they're offering if it's journalism you want to go down, which is more obviously the writing side. You can do obviously specialised sort of broadcasting course, which is a very practical.
Yes, yeah.
So you're getting that practical experience, and I think you've just got to say to yourself, unless I get a really lucky break, I've got to do almost a 10-year apprenticeship before I really can get a foot in the door. And for those that aspire to be on air, normally you've got to do some sort of off-air role first.
Yeah, sure.
Whether it be a panel operator. For those that don't know what a panel operator is, I mean, the person that's pressing all the buttons.
Yeah.
Making us sound good by putting the ads, putting the audio to air.
Yeah, sure.
Whether it be a producer, which can be a really satisfying role, being a producer, because you're chasing the talent for the host.
Yes.
And some of that talent is hard to acquire. It might take 50 phone calls. It might take a few emails.
So, very unique skill set.
Yeah, so they're the foots to get in, unless you are a Carlos Alcaraz of radio.
Yes.
And you're absolutely going to dominate at 19, 20 years of age.
Yes.
There's only two that I can think of that made it really young. The late Clinton Gribus, who was an unbelievable broadcaster, and Anthony Hudson as a young commentator alongside Rex Hunt in his 20s.
Okay, wow, yeah.
They're the two I can think of at the top of my head who have fast-tracked.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas I really felt like I was in the industry and part of it when I was probably 33, 34.
Yeah, sure.
So the first 15 years was finding your feet, doing all these different roles, build great contacts, don't burn any bridges, because the cycle of the media is that you may run into that person again who can give you a job.
Yeah, sure. Brett Phillips, thanks for taking the time for sharing your insights and your journey as a broadcaster and, the evolution of the First Serve platform. Appreciate it.
Great stuff, Sean. This show, I think, is going to take off. I'll be watching.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Thanks, guys. Hey, guys, if you liked that interview, please comment below on what you found interesting, what maybe you wanted to find out more information about, or even if we have any aspiring broadcasters out there, if you want to share your experience, working in broadcasting in tennis or in sport in general. I think, Brett shared some fascinating insights into his life and his journey and what it was like, 20 plus years ago, what it's like now. If you wanted to go down that path as a broadcaster. And as always, guys, please like and subscribe for more life and tennis related content. Cheers, guys.